we have a lot less control than we had. And to remember that we may not have as much control, and we recoil from it. And so I think out of our brokenness, out of our fallenness, we try to control the world around us in great positions. Now, I also like to think of the word extreme in another way, which is it always bad? Is it always bad to be extreme? Is it bad to be extremely loving? Is it bad to have an extreme amount of care? Yes. It can be if it's dysfunctional, right? If it's dysfunctional to a point of hurting others and hurting yourself. But when I think about the love that I believe God has for us, I believe it is an extreme love, and I believe it's extremely welcome. The problem is we get it wrong. And so where I see within religion, we have humans, and where we have humans, we have fault. We have mistakes. And so we're willing to listen, and we hear God properly and we follow, we can overcome those things. But it is not without challenge, and it is not easy. So I'll leave it at that. Keith, Jeff?
Yeah, well, it's a privilege to be here. I appreciate getting invited. Just to let you know a little bit about me. I grew up in California and moved to Houston, Texas when I was in 7th grade. It was a big change going from California to Texas. And people talk funny here in California. I didn't think so. Played basketball in high school, middle school, and high school. And I like to play basketball. I like to drink beer. I like to chase girls. That was kind of what I did with my buddies. When I was a senior in high school, I started liking this girl, and she was a Christian. And she would ask me, she said, "Now, are you saved? Are you a Christian?" I said, "I don't know what that means." I said, "I'm Catholic. I figure that's got to count for something." And she said, "Well, to be saved is different." So I didn't understand her. And she said, "I want you to go to this meeting with me." So we went to this meeting called Young Life. I didn't know what Young Life was. It was on Tuesday night. I found out it was like church on Tuesday. I hated it. And I told her, I said, "Ma'am, I'm not, you tricked me, you got me to go to this thing, I'm not going to it anymore." She goes, "Well, I'm not going out with her again." I said, "All right, when's the next one?" So I went with her to the next one. I liked her. And the next one was a guy that I could relate to. He played football, he was a little over about 27, I'm 17. And he talked about drinking beer, chasing girls, and getting in fights and all this stuff that I was kind of in that world. And then he talked about how he was confronted with the fact that he was a sinner and he needed a Savior. He gave his life to Christ. It was that night the Lord spoke to me and said, "Jeff, if you died, you wouldn't go to heaven. You have no basis to get to heaven. You're trying to be good enough to get to heaven, and you're not. You can never be." So that night, I went up and I trusted Jesus as Savior and Lord. I said, "Jesus, will you save me?" And he did. And my life changed. And so my reason for coming here today is to tell you about God who sent his Son into the world to die on the cross for your sins and to rise again from the dead. Fact of history that Jesus Christ, the only one who ever did that, rose from the dead. He said he was going to do it. He said, "Destroy this temple," speaking of the temple of his body, 3 days, I will raise it up again. And he did do that. And as someone well said, we're talking about extremism. If Jesus Christ did not come out of the grave, then nothing really matters. Because eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you die. But if Jesus Christ did come out of the grave, then nothing else really matters except for that. And that proves that we have a responsibility to him. And as Paul preached on Mars Hill, God has fixed a day in which he will judge the world in righteousness through a man whom he has appointed, having furnished proof to all men by raising him from the dead. And so everybody in this room, we have a date with the Lord Jesus Christ to give an account one day of our times. And so Jesus changed my life, and I became extreme, as Patrick was saying, in my love and in my devotion to him. Now, he was asked one day, "What is the greatest commandment?" Teacher, what is the greatest commandment? Now, we know about the 10 commandments, so they're written on tablets of stone. We figure there are other commandments in the Old Testament, but those 10 made the tablets of stone, not all the others. So it's probably one of those 10 because that's going to be really important if God wrote it into the tablet of stone. But Jesus said the greatest commandment was from Deuteronomy 6, wasn't one of the 10 commandments. He said, here's the greatest commandment. He said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your strength, and all your mind. He said, the second greatest commandment is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself, from Leviticus chapter 19, verse 8. And so he said, on these two commands, loving God vertically, the vertical relationship, which is the first of the tablets, the first 4 commandments, all deal with the vertical relationship. And he said, the second greatest commandment is horizontal. You love your neighbor as yourself. That's the second stone tablet. 6 commandments, all dealing with how we treat people. And so on those 2 commandments depend the whole law and the prophets. And as a Christian, if I walk with God, and if I love God with all my heart, and if I love you as my neighbor with all my heart, I fulfill the 2 greatest commandments, and I make a difference in this world for Christ. Now, as far as extremism goes, Christians are called to be extreme because we have been saved out of this world and sent back to this world to be a witness in this world, and we tell the world that Jesus Christ is the only remedy for sin. There is no other remedy for sin, and you have a terminal disease. And I was born with a terminal disease, and that terminal disease is sin. And the only remedy for sin is Jesus. And the blood that he shed on the cross and his empty tomb. That's the only remedy. Now, if you neglect that or you reject that, then you're going to die from your terminal disease, which is called sin. But you don't have to. And the Lord has Christians in the world to tell others about Jesus, who's mighty to save. The football player Reggie White used to like to say this: I am a nobody, telling everybody about somebody who will save anyone. And that's the job of a Christian, to tell the world that Jesus Christ is Lord of all. Now, Jesus said this: as we do that, people aren't going to like it, because people don't like the narrowness of the gospel. Jesus said, I am the way and the truth and the life, and no one comes to the Father except through me. Very narrow. He's the only one who died and rose again. He's the only one who conquered death and hell and the grave. So he can say what he said. He's the only way. He's the only remedy for sin. Now, when you say that in our world today, people get upset. People don't like that. We're going to shut you up because we don't like your message. There have to be 100 ways to heaven, not just one way. But the Bible teaches there's just one. So as we preach the truth, people get mad. And Jesus said, hey, if the world hates you, know that it hated me before it hated you. Jesus is love in the flesh. He is God in the flesh. He is love personified. And he came into the world, and the world nailed him to a tree. So if we, his followers, do what he did, it's not going to be a surprise when we're persecuted. And Jesus said, blessed are you when men cast insults at you and revile you and say all manner of evil against you falsely on account of me. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward in heaven is great. For so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. So from my perspective, as a believer in Jesus, as a follower of Jesus, I want to be on fire for him. I want to love him with all my heart. I want to love my neighbor as myself. And I want to tell people, love them enough to tell them the truth, even if that makes them mad. Because the quote from Noah, the storm is coming. There's only one ark of safety, and that's the Lord Jesus. And there's room in the ark for you, so to speak. There's room at the cross for you. And anybody who will put his faith and trust in Jesus will be saved from the wrath of his
Halt. I'm Dave Halt. I'm the rector of St. James Episcopal Church downtown. Anybody know anything about the Episcopal Church?
I do as well.
Yeah, we're not well known. We're the American branch of the Church of England. That means you know your English history, you know your English Reformation. We dealt with our own issue of extremism and persecution, even within our own ecclesiastical body. Henry VIII, that name ring a bell? You know, a man like Henry VIII as your quote unquote founder, it's not true, but as your quote unquote founder, you have to believe in grace and the opportunity for salvation. He was not known to be gracious with those who disagreed with him. His daughter Mary was not gracious with those who disagreed with her. She gets the nickname Bloody Mary. Yeah, her daughter Elizabeth also, or his daughter Elizabeth also was not very gracious with those who disagreed with her. So within my own tradition, we have had periods of both extremism and persecution against other Christians. And one of the things about extremism, as we understand it in a cultural phenomenon, is that extremism wishes to impose truth by force. Extremism wishes to impose truth by violence, by social control. So thinking culturally, that is a definition of extremism. And as we've heard, all of us can have a tendency to want to do this. Today, within the church calendar, is the Feast of the Exaltation of the Holy Cross. I'm a member of the Society of the Holy Cross within the Anglican community of the Church of England. And we dedicate our lives to the power of the cross, to living out the power of the cross in our daily lives. And if you understand the cross, you'll understand that it is a sign of power, yes, but ultimately a sign of great humility. Because within Christianity, Jesus Christ humbles himself to be born, right? To take on the human form, to be incarnate, humbles himself, becomes obedient unto death, even death on the cross. Of course, that goes on. Therefore, God has exalted him, and so upon him neighbors above the name shall bow. Every tongue shall confess that he is Lord. But that movement to the cross is a movement of self-surrender and a movement of humility. That we surrender our lives, loving God, loving neighbor. That is picking up our own cross, because that is where power is on. And none of that is of an imposition on somebody else by power or authority to make them do what you want, or even to believe what you believe is true and are committed to. Because here's the thing about God. God is always a gentleman. I love being part of the Church of England because, you know, you think about genteel Englishmen and Englishwomen, you know, we have that sense that there's no imposition. You're asked to be a part. You're asked to do. So God is always gentleman. He doesn't violate our free will. We're invited, but God leaves it up to us. Always. And so the Christian answer is that there really can't be extremism as a cultural understanding within Christianity. That's a violation of Christianity. Because we take out people's free will instead of impose. And of course, within our own tradition, we have persecution. And persecution, again, related to extremism, culturally is that time when the minority is a threat to the majority culture. If you've done any of your basic religious studies, the term culture comes out of what? The cultus, right? Religion, the faith of the people, whatever that cultus happens to be, that forms the culture that people share in. You can have a secular cultus, you have secular extremism. You can have a religious cultus that creates a religious culture. And we all know from history, whenever there's a groundswell of something that's a threat to the majority, and the majority's power, the majority's prestige, the majority's ability to impose its will, or the powers that be's authority to impose its will, there will be a reaction, and there's persecution. The cross itself is a symbol of that. Jesus, to the secular powers, to the first century is a threat. They lose power. Because here's the deal. What if death wasn't a threat? I mean, really, what ultimate power does secular power and authority have? The ultimate power of death, right? To take life. But that's no longer a threat because of the resurrection of Christ. What happens to power? What happens to their ability to exercise power? So in the early church, why is Christianity a threat? The state no longer has control over it. Sacred power, the empire no longer has control over life and death. Because life and death for the Christians only found in relationship with God the Father through God the Son, Jesus Christ, in the power of the Holy Spirit.
My name is Saad Mustafa. I represent the Muslim community in Texarkana. I don't consider myself a scholar, or I haven't spent all these years that you don't spend in texts and scriptures. But I consider myself a student of the Quran. Whenever the term extremism is used in this culture in America, we always think of Bin Laden and violence. So the term has become closely associated with violence, whether we like it or not. And this is the reality of the term. The term is used always to portray a certain group as being evil or wrong. Now, for a person who studied the Quran, I take the word extreme as in a different sense, and the Quran touches on that. The word extreme is in existence in the Quran. To me, an extreme ideology is an add-on to what the original founder of the religion has said. That creates extremism. And these add-ons actually usually motivated by organized religion and politics. That's what actually drives extremism in the world and drive religious cults. So let's take an example from our own, let's take Bin Laden as an example. Bin Laden is not a religious man. Bin Laden is a political individual who could not actually express his views in Saudi Arabia that the West should not have military bases in Saudi Arabia. He could not express that in any way other than to rally followers and people and say, well, this is against the religion. So this is where the add-ons comes in, and it creates an extremist ideology. So extreme is just nothing but an add-on to what the original founder has said. And practically speaking, most religious organizations have so much add-ons that if you just sift it and just get rid of it, then there is no extremism anymore. That's to me what an extreme. Extreme something off what the original founder of the religion has actually, be as it may. What the original founder has established is the mainstream of that particular religion, and any add-ons to justify political ends is actually extremism. These add-ons are nothing but political views. You see these days, I mean, you see religious groups actually rally behind, well, politicians always want religious groups to rally behind them because they want the support of the masses. And as a result, the religious leaders will find a way to show that the mass that this political ideology is justified in our religion, and they just start quoting verses and chapters to show the masses that this political leader is actually in the right direction and we should support him. So to get rid of extremism, let's separate religion from politics completely, and then there will be no extremism. That's what I propose, that's what I think. And to get rid of this issue, religion should stop jumping into politics and being a tool of politicians. If you want to be religious, stay away from politicians. And we have actually our scholars in history, like Imam Malik. He actually was whipped because he would not actually associate himself with the politicians. We have a long traditions and oral traditions speaking about how evil it is to associate with politicians and politics. Extremism is the result of politics. Politics and religion should be actually completely separated if you want to get rid of extremism. This is my views on
So completely honored to be here on this panel of great men, great admiration for many of them and the things that they have said. And if I could just add my very elementary opinion about this subject. Ravi Zacharias once said that you cannot have a noble message and a non-noble method. And that simply means is that if we preach love, if we preach compassion, if we preach grace, if that's our message, then the method in which we deliver the message cannot be in direct contradiction to the message itself. If it's in direct contradiction to the message itself, then it would cause a great question of anybody who hears the message, whether or not you really believe what you're saying. I believe wholeheartedly in freedom of religion. But in my view, freedom of religion includes the ability to believe what you wish, but also the ability to not believe at all. And if my belief imposes on your ability to not believe or to express that in any way or to not express it at all, then there's something wrong with my belief. Make no mistake about it. I'm a man who has great theological convictions. And I believe that the Bible is right, and I believe that Jesus Christ is Lord and Savior, and that He is the only way to salvation. However, my personal belief and my personal conviction should in no way impede on your ability to believe or not believe. And whenever any of us has a belief that would attempt to stop you from acting out, attempt to stop you from moving on your own convictions in the direction that you will and that you wish, I believe that my position, and any of our positions, can become extremist in the idea that we set up an environment with consequences and rules and all of those things that would essentially persecute you because you don't think how I think. Now, let me just say this, because I realize the space that I'm in. I believe wholeheartedly in sharing the good news of the gospel and attempting to convince you of what I believe is right for your life. I believe that wholeheartedly. However, I believe wholeheartedly in each person's choice and decision to not choose what I believe. I believe wholeheartedly that in each person's choice and decision, that if you think differently than I think, that you have the freedom to exercise those beliefs. Here's the truth, right? The truth is that you're looking at a group of men from various religious backgrounds. And if we were to examine our religious backgrounds individually, we would find that we don't agree on everything theologically. And so religious freedom is the ability for each man to sit here and likewise, each woman or man out in the audience to sit in their own convictions and be convinced of what they believe and to exercise that belief completely. I want to say finally that each religious group, I believe, has extremists. And I believe that extremists are created when certain religions and their sacred texts are taken out of context. And when you take sacred texts of whatever religious group you belong and you take it out of context and you apply it to whatever evil and devious thought process or behavior that you want to carry out, we create extremists. But likewise, in my closing statements, I want to say that I'm not sure that I'm convinced that the most dangerous folks to us are the extremists themselves. I believe that the most dangerous are those that we consider moderates, because moderates are those who in some way will sympathize with the extremists. Well, I don't agree with what he did, but I can see how he or she came to that conclusion. And when moderates, those who toe the line, those who will not condemn the extremists that emerges out of these different religious groups, when those individuals will not stand up and will not speak up and will not speak out as loudly and as boldly as they can, those moderates give a rite of passage to the extremists to continue to do what they do without taking any risk and without accepting any blame. And so if the extremist goes and blows up this or shoots up a church or does whatever they do, and the moderate says, well, I don't condone it, but I can see how they're angry. Or, well, I don't condone it, but I see this or I see that. When the moderate takes that position, and then when something tragic happens, the only thing that they have to do is sit back and say, yeah, I wouldn't have done it. Those are the most dangerous next to the extremists, and they become complicit. And so I'll be done. Y'all looking at me like this guy's crazy, but I'll be done. Thank you so much for listening.
All right, thank you very much for the introductions and initial thoughts on this topic. I should have mentioned, I'm terrible at this, at the beginning, that the place theme this year is religion, spirituality, and the sacred. And so what we decided as a faculty was to sort of divide that theme up into a bunch of different sub-themes that many of our freshmen are going to be working through later this semester, and we as a campus are going to be working through. So hence why we're talking about persecution and extremism, and then next month we'll be talking about different themes, but all within that religion, spirituality, and sacred. I also wanted to mention that we put the invitation out to a variety of interfaith groups who we are hoping we'll be able to see as the year goes on as well. We did invite the Nye Zion Temple in Shreveport, the Dallas Buddhist Center, as well as Sacred Heart Catholic. So we're going to have hopefully all of them back as well, plus more. That'd be great, ideally. So the more the merrier, certainly. And with that, I'm going to open it up to questions from the audience, questions from Zoom. I've got some questions myself, and we'll see where the discussion goes. Yes, ma'am.
I forgot how I was gonna ask the question. Kind of, got me there when you was talking, but more I'm trying to see how do you feel that theocracy, or I don't know if I'm saying the right term, but when the government gets involved with religion, how do you think they play an influence into people's choices? Because like you said, the modern he was a politician or a politician, and he was a politician, and he took the sacred words of the Islamic race and made it he became an extremist because he took the word out of context, like you said. So how do you feel he actually plays a role in people's influence?
The Latin is a political figure that is portrayed as a religious figure. First of all, he does not have any training in the Quran and traditional Islamic. I don't like to emphasize the word theology. Theology of Islam is not emphasized at all. But that's we leave that to another day. Different discussion.
I don't want to.
Theology is considered trash, but the practice and spiritual experience with the divine is the most important thing. I know that it's offense to anybody. Yeah. I know they spend a lot of years in theology.
Like divine right, like it was not gonna lie to English, like it would have some pretty messed up kings and queens, like, but you know, they had the divine right, like I was put in this position because God put me in this position, so you have to do this because God wants you to do this. Like it's changed over time, but like, you know, it's like it's still, you can't help but to see that religion and government are kind of like, it's like a blurred line. It's not a solid.
If Saudi Arabia had democracy, we would not have seen bin Laden. Simple as that. He would have been able to express his political view through a certain form that would have been acceptable. When they said, no, you cannot express these views because it's against the royal family's way of handling things. Of course, to rally the masses behind him, what else can he use but religion? How do politicians, they use religion to rally masses? Exactly. I mean, if we speak about abortion, they rally the church. I'm against abortion, but I would refuse to allow a politician to make my conviction in my heart as a platform for him to use it against someone else. No, I am against abortion, but I'm not, for example, I'm just using that as an example, but I'm not going to let anybody to politicize my belief. Okay, so same thing with bin Laden here, what happened? Bin Laden is actually a political figure who could not express himself, and he used religion specifically to rally the masses behind him. That's purely what bin Laden is. He's not a scholar. He is, even when he speaks in Arabic, and you're not privileged to the language, but when he speaks in Arabic, he does not come off as a scholar. He does not come off as a person who spent days and nights in worship and in the recitation of the Quran, which is traditionally known among the people who actually study the Quran in depth. No, he does not come off as that. To me, he comes off as a politician with a turban and a long beard. That's all. He's a politician, and he's struggling with a group of people to express those views in the name of religion.
Well, I'll be the controversial one. I'm a theocrat. Ruled by God. I'm a theocrat. I'm a monarchist at heart. And not an English monarch. I was a British monarchy. But as a follower of Jesus, Jesus is my king. So I'm a theocrat. And my life is to be ruled by Christ, and following the ways of Christ. But I do think we need to be very careful that we're not putting religion as being something that's simply organized and a part of the great faiths. If we're going to do philosophy of religion, I do believe every single one of us has a sacred ultimate somewhere. It may be ourselves. It may be Big Macs. I don't know. Chick-fil-A sandwich, whatever it is. But there is something that is so important to us, inside of us, that we will form our life around it. And ultimately want to have other people form their lives around it as well. And that may be politics. So religious people can't truly separate politics and religion. And we're all religious at some level. We may not admit it, but we're all religious at some level. And we need to be careful with our politics. But our religion is going to influence our politics. And frankly, as people of faith, if it doesn't influence our politics, there's something wrong with us, because what we're saying is we're not holistic here. We're not fully human beings in all of this. Because yeah, my faith does influence my vote.
Can we talk about the separation between church and state?
No, that's the Anglican won't do that.
Mark.
We also have a question in the chat. So
On separation of church and state. So for me, the tax code is kind of clear on this. You might be a little bit shocked by this, but we have some tax exemption for income tax. In Texas, we have it for sales tax, but not in Arkansas. I learned that when we were buying materials for flood buckets to be sent to flood areas. And when we bought materials to send to flood areas, if I bought them in Arkansas, I paid sales tax. If I bought them in Texas, we did not pay sales tax. And I'm like, we're giving all this away. Well, Arkansas didn't care. But, you know, that's a whole separate issue. But for us to maintain our tax free for income taxes to business, we're not allowed to say or do certain things around politics. And so an example of that would be for me from the pulpit to say, you need to vote for and name a candidate. Now, where I would be proper is I would be able to say, y'all need to vote. Y'all need to become informed. You need to learn what you believe, and you need to follow your beliefs, and you need to vote. Now, I don't think that's objectionable, but I think it is objectionable at the point when it becomes autocratic, and I say, you need to vote for this person, you need to vote for the. I think where I might be able to get away with something is if I said, I don't think that as the church, we should support casinos. Because we think gambling takes money from the poor. So from that, I think I would be okay, because it's about a policy, not about an individual. And so there's some lines there that are around the tax code. And so the government's trying to give us guidance on this. Is that helpful at all?
Well, I'm not gonna give you advice on what's going to transgress the tax code.
Yeah.
We'll be talking to you down at SCI.
Do I have to respond to that? Because I've been involved in politics for years, both from the Republican and Democratic side. And there's a very specific reason why I do that as a pastor. And the reason why I do that is because my job, I believe that I've been called by God to care for and be concerned about the social, financial, the physical, and the spiritual part of the people that I serve. I believe that's my responsibility. And so I believe as an informed leader of the people that I serve, you don't have to embrace it or agree with it or whatever, but I do need to call and sound the alarm when somebody or something can adversely affect my people, right? You know, I believe that's my responsibility. And so while I won't say, hey, vote for this guy or vote for this guy, what I will say is, guys, we need to be careful about this, because this is what they espouse. This is how they can negatively affect your life in this way or another. And for me, I don't care whether you are Republican or Democrat, right? I don't care if you black, white, green, purple, orange, or yellow. Because I know who I pastor and I know what my responsibility is, I don't care if they take away the tax exemption or not. I believe so strongly that whenever someone has the potential to do harm to the people that I lead and the voice or the people that listen to my voice, it's my job to sound the alarm. And sometimes that puts me in a precarious situation, but I don't really care because I answer to God in that way.
We got a question in the chat that I will read as well, and then we can respond to. From Barbara Sears, do you think violence is always a contributor to extremism, or is it a personal? Yeah. So is violence inherent in, well, let's say inherent in the concept of extremism? But some of you touched on this already.
Well, I'll jump around. I don't think violence is the only factor associated with extremism. However, I think there are a number of other factors that could be associated with extremism, like social and cultural isolation. That may be a factor that's associated with extremism. financial, what's the word I'm looking for? Financial consequences might be a factor of extremism. And so you don't always have to be knocking somebody upside the head. But if you restrict them from things that others have access to on account solely of religion, I believe that those factors are many factors associated with it, not simply violence.
We've heard that, and I agree that we can be extreme in our religion in terms of our love for the divine without being violent. I'm gonna take this in another direction. I don't know if this was meant by the person who asked the question, but is violence a contributor to extremism? You've heard of an eye for an eye, right? And an eye for another eye, and an eye for another eye, until everyone's blind. Violence may indeed be a contributor to extremism. In that, how easy would it be to become extreme and respond to violence if violence is perpetrated on your community on a regular basis? Would you not, at your heart of hearts, at a very human, visceral level, would you not want to respond violently to that, to protect your family, your home, your people, your values? And so from that end, having violence perpetrated on you, even if you're not an extremist, might lead you to an extreme position. And I don't, there's other questions.
When is it considered extremism? Like, what level would it be considered extremism? Like, when the violence is enacted, or like, what if they're not violent at all, but they're still considered extreme? Like, what would
Like Malcolm
Yes.
X.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's a good question.
Kind of your answer, Tom.
You know, I'll just draw off of rock and roll at this point. And when you have an extreme rock and roll rock star, their lifestyle can be extreme. Drugs, partying, rock and roll, off the complete extreme. Is that healthy? Is it good for the person? Is it good for people to emulate? No. When is extremism, because we've added ism to it, right? It's just extremism. When is it at such a point it becomes detrimental to the individual and detrimental to the society? And I think that's the question. But I think, as I started the discussion with, I think it's within all of us to be capable. But we are called to check it. We all have capabilities of doing really ugly things. We'd like to think we aren't. But history has proved us wrong again and again. If you look at what happened in Germany during the Nazis, everyday people did very ugly things. If you look at Rwanda, you just go throughout history, the Khmer Rouge. I mean, again and again and again. So this is within us. And I think when we own it, we can then say, but I choose not to go. I choose to love people. I choose to love God more than I choose to having one of them. And for me, that's kind of the crux of the issue, is owning it in ourselves.
Jump in.
Well, I think in Christianity, you can have extremism. There are some churches where they handle snakes. That's not violence, except to the person who's handling the snake. That would be somebody that's misinterpreting the passage and so the word you never snakes. But that would be an example of, okay, that's extremism that is going to hurt you. But it's not hurting other people necessarily. You're not throwing snakes at them next
It'll be a different Sunday this week, won't it?
Right, yeah. I'm not gonna do
Can I circle back to separation of church and state? that, in the original understanding of that, that was meant to protect the church from the state, not the state from the church. Again, let the guy from the Church of England say this, we had the monarch was the head of the church, and still is the, titular head of the church. So that was a reaction to George III telling us that we have to do over here religiously.
Yeah,
I'm not really sure how to say this or like how to really put it into words, but I feel like as a society, like as humans, we've evolved in terms of like a lot of the stuff that are now in this era, it wasn't back in the day. And I know like there's different versions of like the Bible and certain stuff that have been, I feel like it's been nitpicked because of like politics and whatever it is that people are trying to get into power. But how do y'all feel about like the society now and how we should deal with the ideologies of like the past? I feel like I was raised as Catholic my whole life, it's just like how it's been. Now I'm kind of in the rocking tradition. I feel like everything is like right, wrong, but what makes the church have the ideology of telling us what's strictly right or wrong and we can be prosecuted for certain stuff? I don't know if I said.
yeah, essentially, where does religion go?
Yeah.
Tell us.
And on top of that, like, what is the difference? Because one of our things is religion and spirituality. What is the main difference between them?
Take that.
Take it. So I'll try to work with the idea of religion. This may be shocking, but religion is about truth, not about feelings. In the end, what we're searching for with religion is what is the truth behind different things. I think spirituality often deals more in our feelings. Do we feel close to God? Do we feel what's, so when we separate our feelings from what we believe at the base of it is true. Now, if history is any guide, do any of our churches have it 100% correct? What do you think, guys? No.
Wait a minute, I was thinking.
Okay. I'll give you. But do we have the essentials? What is creation? Who made it? What relationship do we have? What relationship do we have to nature? What responsibilities do we have to each other? And those are the questions that religion struggles with. Do we get it right? I wish we did all the time. It's not that we don't take the question seriously. I think spirituality is how do we feel about it? Now, I may be wrong on that, on the spirituality side. I think spirituality is much more individualized, and religion is much more corporate. Does this make any discernment?
And I'm drawn to the story of Moses. One of the desert Damascus, who was known to be a very wise and holy. And he was asked to come and pass judgment on another monk in a monastery. He says, I can't do it. No, you have to. You're a wise and holy. No, I can't do it. You're a wise and holy monk. You're the one who has to pass judgment on this person. So Abba Moses went. He took a water skin and he put a hole in the water skin. He walked through the desert of Egypt, to the monastery. And he said, I am here to pass judgment. My sins follow the water. And within the patristic, the church fathers' understanding of Christianity, the only one we judge, should be judging, is ourselves and our relationship with Christ. I can't judge you. as a pastor, right? If we have a pastoral conversation and be true, but it's not my job to judge. We judge ourselves, lest we be judged ultimately. And that is that very personal spiritual relationship with God. So that was one of my all-time favorites, because I think of my life now. But when I come into a conversation with anyone that's going to be pastor, I know my sins are passing out behind me like water out of the pipes. So am I to be loving like Jesus or judgmental?
You know, so I got relationships with, and I'm a millennial, by the way, if you couldn't tell.
Hey.
And I got relationships with people in all age groups, but. So my conviction and the way that I see life, my philosophy of life is a theocratic perspective, right? You know, I believe Jesus is Lord and King. I believe the word of God is God revealed through his written word. That's how I see and try to govern my life. Don't always get it right, but that's essentially the blueprint for which I live my life. I think the problem that if I had to give a critique of my generation, the generations after us, is that many people reject the theocratic philosophy of how they see life, but don't have any other paradigm of which they see life. It's kind of like I wake up this morning, and if I feel like it, I do it. If I don't, I don't. You know, there's no rhyme or reason to how you view life, what you see out of it. It's simply based off of how I feel today. And so for those who are truly seeking and truly listening to how they're going to shape their life, the best thing that I could say is I believe that Jesus is the way and the word of God is the way. However, if you reject that, on what basis do you make your decisions, right? On what basis do you decide how you view people, how you view yourself, how you view the world? On what basis do you make that? And so my challenge would be to anybody who's kind of searching and seeking and maybe on the ropes, and I don't know about this God thing, and I don't know about church, and I don't know about the Bible. If that's you, okay, fine. Choose Jesus is my recommendation. But if you don't, how are you proceeding, right? You know, do you believe yourself to be so smart that you can just figure it out? Because the truth is that the world did not get as it is, as messed up as it is. But there are a whole lot of good things about it too. But how did we get here, and by what paradigm and what thought process, what philosophy did we employ, and do we need to employ as we make the next steps? And so that would be my recommendation. There are about 7 different worldviews, I believe. You can Google it and look it up, but figure out what's your worldview, and then walk in there.
I do have a question. Yeah, that's kind of a personal question, but I'm scared of it. So, do you believe that God actually gives out free will? Because to me personally, I feel like it's a forced choice, because you can either do as God says or you can burn in hell. And there's no other option between that. To me personally, I don't believe that's a fair choice, because no one wants to burn, no one wants to be tortured forever. But if I don't do anything that God sees as fair or sees as right, I'm basically burning in hell. I don't see it. To me personally, I don't feel like it's a fair choice, but I'll see your people's in that.
I'll answer that. If you have a disease, and you go to the doctor and he says, okay, this is your disease that's going to kill you. There's only one remedy for your disease, and you have to take this medicine. And you say, well, I don't want to take that medicine. I want to take this other medicine. Like, well, you can take whatever medicine you want, but there's only one medicine that's going to cure you. You have a choice. And the cost of the medicine that will cure you was God sent his son to die for you on the cross and shed his blood and take all the penalty for your sin upon himself. And that's the cost of the medicine. And you say, but I don't want that. I want to have my own way. I want to do it my own way. So that's your choice. You can do that if you want, but that's not going to work. And you're going to die of the disease when you didn't have to. And God paid a huge price so that that wouldn't be your end, but you rejected it.
So just make sure you choose
Well,
that thing.
Well, it is free will. Free will to accept or reject.
So, yeah, there's actually kind of two things going on. Probably the best book that's an easy read on something like this is by C.S. Lewis called The Great Divorce. It's a great play. And it's like, you could read it in under an hour. It's really a good book. And I don't know, have you read The Great Divorce?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, great book. So anyway, it walks you through whether we want to accept reality or reject reality. And so that's the question that Jeff here is answering is, we can accept the reality of what God is telling us, or we can reject it. Now, the other question dealing around free will is a whole other theology question that I don't think you're asking. And there is some theology around this particular idea that God has already chosen those who will be saved, and God has already chosen those who will burn in hell, and that you do not have any free will. God has chosen you, or God has rejected you already. And that's under Calvinism.
My other course I'm talking
And
about.
I thought at first that was a question.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that one.
And I thought I just wanted to talk about that.
Not the more confused.
But that's a whole nother, yeah, that's a whole nother issue.
I'm going to bring it to your question. To me, when somebody says either you do what God said or you're gonna burn in hell, usually you feel hell. So it's a feeling in your heart and a sensitivity to that hell has to be actually developed. We have actually spiritual senses just like our physical senses. If these spiritual senses are actually awakened, then you will feel it immediately. So to me, that's what hell is. You're going to feel it.
Well, here's another way to look at it. So if you're driving in a car and you're driving 60 miles an hour and you're getting ready to go off the cliff, but you don't know that, and somebody's flagging you down, telling you don't go that way, that's going to lead to your death. And you say, well, who are you to tell me what I can do whatever I want? Well, if you keep going in that direction, and this guy keeps trying to get you to turn around, you keep saying, no, no, no. Well, you're going to eventually go and you're going to find, wait a minute, I just went off the cliff and now I'm dead. All the while, the Lord was he's the guy trying to flag you down, saying, turn around, you don't need to go this way.
But why is it always just death? Or why can't it be like you decide one type of way? Like it doesn't have to end up in death automatically. Like just because I don't want to do certain things, I have to die for that. I have to like suffer for that. I can just live a certain way because I choose to live that way. I'm like,
Can I ask you to hold this question seriously? I'm not trying to put you off. Hold this question to when we have the conversation on mysticism.
Yeah, that's kind of
Okay. There's a conversation coming up later, so it's been on mysticism that I think there's a school of Christian theology that can answer that, but not in this place.
Sorry.
In a different way.
So back to going to the doctor, you have a terminal disease. You said, well, why do I have to have a terminal disease? Well, you do. I mean, all of us do. It's called sin. All of sin and fall short of the glory of God. You may not like the fact that you have that, but you have it, I have it, we have it, Adam had it. You can't escape it.
Sorry, well, this is what happens when we're very enthusiastic. This is good. But like a terrible faculty member, I'm gonna go ahead and just go to the next question. So I'm gonna read Logan's question, and I think Catherine has a question, you have a question. I will point out, it's interesting that we are talking a lot about extremism. And I was talking to Dr. Oberiki, that we have shunted persecution a little bit off to the side. Maybe we'll get to that towards the end, we'll see. Yeah, Logan's question, and we'll just say, very quickly, if each of you want to weigh in, 30 seconds maybe. Where do you draw the line between extremism and orthodoxy? So at what point does orthodoxy become extremism? We're going to be talking about orthodoxy in our question class next week. So, yeah.
I'll be very simple.
Sure.
Orthodox is never extreme.
So two totally separate.
Right, we're totally
Orthodoxy
One
and not the extreme.
Now, if we're talking extremism, the Patrick talked about, it, we love God, we're extreme, love God, fine. But orthodoxy can never be extremist. Extremists are never orthodox.
They're automatically by definition.
Well, ortho, right, doxy, God. So getting God right never leads to extremism.
Pretty straightforward. Okay.
I mean, disagree?
No, I disagree with that.
Okay, good.
So yeah, get God
I
right,
stick with what
extremism is
I
God.
said first. Orthodoxy, what is orthodoxy?
Right, getting God right.
Is it the original teaching of the master?
Well, that's the
Founder?
next question. Yeah, that is, yeah, how do you get it right?
Yeah.
How do you get that right?
All right.
I mean, so
That's
that's
fine.
where.
So the church has an answer to this.
All right.
But by definition, these are two separate.
Caps, good.
Hello, it's interesting that whenever, Lemire asked a question about if we have free will, I know that you guys say that we're all born with the same strategy. I feel like there's such a huge disconnect within like different societies and generations whenever you guys speak on those things, because there isn't much of a connection nowadays where people can, oh, let's go to church, let's do this and that to build some kind of connection with God. And there is plenty of people that can do that. However, like, how do you justify the things that happened in the past, the things that continue to happen that actually make people want to not even think about religion and go to church? And when we continue to see that sin is a problem that we all have to face in reality, I mean, that's just my personal opinion. I feel like sin is just mistakes that we are prone to do because we are human beings and we're perfect, so we make mistakes. But it almost seems like everybody's not so helpful view on what sin is and the disconnect with God. It's like we're so imperfect that we have to do these things to be connected with God, do these things to be connected with people in order to be saved in a way, and know that I know that we as people, we can't go to heaven by our own means, right? But there's always this I feel like there's going to be more of a disconnect as we continue to move forward, because there's differences in culture, there's differences in religions, but there's also differences in life experiences that people go through, and just different intersectionalities that people now see they're a little bit more open to different other possibilities and definitions and meanings to their own life. To now that whenever we have this conversation, obviously there's always going to be tension. There's always going to be some kind of disagreements. Because the connection is never going to be there as it used to be, because now we're prone to do our own thing, or at least to make our own, to believe our own way of life because of the different experiences that people have told or have experienced with different people that are in these religions. So I would just say, how do you guys, I know that you guys see our generation and be like, hey, we're a bunch of crazy people running around doing our own thing, but these people are dealing more with mental health issues. We're finding disconnections everywhere. We're dealing, everybody has their own thing, generational trauma from, I would say, our minorities. And my overall question is, why is it that we continue to always find this gap and never try to connect and find a foundation where people can connect with something? Because it just seems to me like there's this ideology. Yes, no, there's how it is. People want to step about it, but you just lose people about it, especially in terms of this generation.
I'm gonna burst your bubble with it. You're not unique. Your generation is not unique. I'm sorry. Y'all think you are. Every generation. My generation, I was sitting in college, my generation is unique, we're the first generation ever have to deal with any of this stuff. we're not, we think we are in the time, but that's where perspective comes in. You do have unique problems that we didn't have, that is true, but not every generation is unique. We all go through these struggles. I do believe that we live in a period of time where we are, as a culture, coming out of a dominant culture to many, many subcultures. And the closest historical period I can equate this to, it's an analogy, it's not an equation, is the Roman Empire. If you study the Roman Empire, look at all the religions, the different theologies, and the different worldviews that were all present, all the different choices. And that's kind of where we live. And, for Christians, they presented the gospel. How long did it take for Christianity to become the dominant religion of the Roman Empire? And even then, did they all agree all the time? Yeah. If you know your history, you guys would have a question. And so I think that's part of it. In terms of the issues, I'm going to say, I'm going to take this from my Christian brothers. I think we need to stop talking about sin as things we do. Your analogy of the disease is great, because sin, the things that we do, can be sins. But sin in itself, the interior problem, when I look in the mirror in the morning and I say, all is not right with me, there's something going on. And the church fathers and mothers always said that was what sin is in us. It's that part of us that is not right. We were made for communion with God. And anything that breaks that communion with God is not right in me. And if we're honest with ourselves, there's not a one of us that can stand up with a clear conscience and say, no, absolutely nothing wrong with me. I'm perfect. I'm great. I'm awesome. You can do that?
Oh, no, I was. Well, I can. But
So I prefer to talk about this as disease. And the ultimate disease is death. We're all gonna die.
So, piggyback on this idea of sin, I think it's also, it's the main idea that it's broken the main relationship with God. But in doing that, it's made me have to tell lies. Okay? And so it's broken my relationship with nature, and it's broken my relationship with people. So I exchange my relationship with nature and I personify it so I get people needs met through objects. I buy a really nice sports car. I abuse nature. I do whatever I do, I personify it. And so my relationship with nature is broken. And I think that speaks profoundly with your generation. I think the other thing that it then does is it makes me objectify people and abuse people in that way. So my sin, my brokenness with God is played out in all of our relationships. And I think it's very helpful to understand it that way. That then also nature is fallen. And so all of this is broken. How do we live with each other in the midst of that? And I think that's a profound discussion. Is it okay for us to differ? Well, I sure hope so. Because we all do. And I think that's where love is hardest, is when we look, it's really easy to love people who are just like us. But that's just self-love. So to learn to overcome and to love people who aren't like us is to be sacrificed for ourselves.
We talk about sin breaks your relationship with God. The Bible is all about God trying to draw people back to us. And so it's not about religion.
It's the rescue story.
The Jews were religious, and they were the ones that said crucify him, crucify him. So it's not about how I can check all the boxes. It's about a relationship with God. The only way you get that is through Jesus Christ, who died on the cross for your sins and rose again from the dead. That's the message of the Bible. You can be connected back to God and have a personal relationship with the creator of the universe. That's what he wants. And so it's not about rules. That's why Jesus said the greatest commandment is to love God with all your heart. And when you love God with all your heart, then you're going to love other people You're never gonna do harm to other people. You're not gonna strap a bomb to yourself to go blow them up or anything like that. You're gonna do what's good for you. And you're going to tell people the truth about, hey, you have a broken relationship with God. Let me tell you how you can have that mended. And so that's the mission of Christians, to go out into the world, share the good news.
Very quickly,
We have
think
one
about
last
the
question.
law of unintended consequences as well, right? And that's part of what we Christians saying, the fallen creation. That even when we do good things, there can be a negative impact. You know, we think we're doing good here, but are we really causing further damage? The environment's a very good example.
We have one more question, quick question. I'm sure very simple. No pressure.
It's very similar to what I was asking earlier, so I'm not regret asking this. But we were speaking about how religion religion, you're trying to find the truth about ourselves, right? So when we find that truth, and it's when we find that truth, and everyone, you know, sees that that is true, what happens? We just kind of turn into robots and lose sense of humanity, you know?
No, I think that's one of the gamers.
But if everyone's doing the same thing, then
Oh, no, I don't think that makes everybody do the same thing.
so you do think that we could still have freedom. and still
Oh, I
have-
think that's what we finally have.
The Christian theological perspective from the fathers is that truth is a concept. Truth is a person. The Christianity, who is that truth? Jesus Christ. So when we are in truth, who are we like?
When you find the truth, it will set you free.
So we will be like him. That's the promise.
So I'll rip off a movie analogy. So have you watched the James Bond series of movies? You guys are way in for that, right? We were really, really small. There's like 5 or 6 different people who've all played James Bond. Well, each one of them played James Bond is a different way. So in the same way, when we become, Christ comes to live in us, we become Christ-like. We incarnate Christ as us. As Pierce Brosnan did, each of these different characters. It breaks down because they're playing a character, but we become free to become who God made us to be.
Even to the people.
Oh, well.
All right, well, we are largely out of time. So I'm just gonna make a couple of announcements, and we can thank our panelists. I wanted to point out that our next roundtable is gonna be on October 14th at 2:30 again in this room. We're gonna tackle something nice and easy, the soul and salvation. So we'll talk about that for a while. And then in November, we're gonna do mysticism. So, yeah, join us for those. We do have a couple of events coming up in September. My colleague is sharing. Our next one is September 23rd. Mindy's Word, who is the pastor out at National Methodist, is going to be speaking at 6 p.m. in this room on the Rainbow Connection, Preaching Inclusivity, Inclusive Love in Exclusionary Times. And then on the 30th, we have Dr. Michael Perry, who's going to be giving a book club talk at 12:15 again in this room. On the Florentine Codex and Spiritual Conquest of New Spain, that's going to be in conjunction with the History Department and Hispanic Heritage Month. So, yes, Doctor.
Do they have our contact info?
Yes, we have your contact info.
If anybody has any further questions, want to carry on further dialogue with me, see them, feel free to pass on my info.
Let's go ahead and thank our panelists, and then you can come up and talk to them before they start. Yeah. Yeah. I'll God bless.
Oh, really?
And I was wondering.